Welcome back. You're listening to The Human Resource. My name is Pandy Pridemore. We're filming here from ICRC-TV in Cincinnati, and we're just thrilled to be here. Today's episode is policies that you don't want to forget. And, I really feel that this is important because, again, the attorneys that I talk to or the attorneys that I work with on a regular basis, we share notes. We talk. And we're starting to see a common thread of policies that they will work for you. They are meant to be used in handbooks. And we talk about, well, when did you have to add that? Or why would they have not had that in their handbook? So I thought, well, this might be a really good opportunity to stop what we've been doing in regards to some of the conversations. And let's go back over the employee handbook. And you've all heard me talk about the core handbook policies. There are policies in there that just are non-negotiables. They're the core. Employees see these as they're not company specific. They're more federal driven. They're more state driven. They're the policies that are etched in stone, like at-will employment, EEOC, harassment. The policies that aren't culturally derivative or defined. But there are and I just thought of another one. There are just little policies that I go back through and I think, wait a minute, you should have this or you should have that. So let's go through. I've got a list of 9 now. Gosh, I can't believe this. I probably could have added another one before we end the conversation. But let's start at the very first one. How many of you have in your handbooks that employees must sign all company documents? That employees are required to sign all company documents. This is one that Scott Warwick is really big about enforcing. And here's the reasoning. Here's his explanation behind it. When you hand an individual a document, whether it's a performance evaluation or whether it's a waiver for the 401k, you're asking them to sign it for a very specific reason. And many times employers will look and go, well, I refuse to sign. Well, if that's important to you, then it needs to be important to them. And you have the right to say, well, you know what? If you don't sign it, there's a really good chance that we're going to have to end the employment. You see, you have to draw the line somewhere. And if you're doing an investigation for a harassment claim and you ask them for a statement and they say, no, I don't want to sign it, I don't want to be committed, how good is that statement to you? That's an important element of your investigation. So I love this policy or this little phrase and line, and you can put it in several places within the handbook. But that's my first one, that employees must sign all employee documents or company documents, excuse me. How about employees have no right or should never assume any sense of privacy? I think this is one of those policies or one of those thoughts that are just assumed to be in play. But in fact, if you do not have that in writing and do not have a signature behind it that the employee has read it and understood it, you aren't going to find that enforceable. So you should put somewhere in your policy, where appropriate, that employees should not assume any sense of privacy. Company computers, company cell phones, iPads. How about if you want to go through somebody's desk? I know of some very territorial office managers used to lock their desks and not share the key, when in fact that's company property. There should be no ability to maintain their own space without the company having access to it. So think about that one. How about the removal of proprietary information on personal devices? And I think this is one that sometimes really gets overlooked. I had a company call me the other day, and we started talking, and I said, well, didn't you tell me that your graphic designers are using their personal computers, especially your remote workers? And he said, oh, yeah, they all use that. I said, well, then when they terminate or separate, how are you getting all of that information back? And he said, well, they're supposed to be. And then he stopped. And he said, they're supposed to be using our server. They're supposed to be coming in onto our computer systems, but I really don't have any guarantee that they're doing that. And it was an interesting thought for him, because he really had to go back and start asking some questions, and found out that nobody was really checking to see if they were using his actual proprietary software and putting the stuff into the server, and that there was a good chance he had lost client information or client work because people separated and he didn't bother to go back in and remove stuff. I have some individuals who they're allowing their employees to use their cell phones, and the individuals in off hours, especially if the individual's working with a client in a different time zone, they're getting contracts, they're getting documents, they're getting communication onto their personal cell phones, and they're leaving it there. They're not transferring it over into the client file. And so what happens to that? That's historical information. That's vital to the company. That's proprietary information. If the individual leaves and you don't have a policy to scrub that device, guess who gets to keep it? So I would highly, highly recommend that one. How about the one that a line or a policy that says the company reserves the right to make deductions for any personal expenses spent on a credit card, for damage to a company computer or the loss of a cell phone. Some states restrict this. So I want to caution you, you have to look at the state by which the employee resides in. But if the state permits it, think about how powerful that is if an employee understands that you don't have to have them sign a separate paper. It's nice to have them say, I understand I'm going to have $50 taken from this paycheck or this payroll to pay back the company money I used on their credit card. But it's nice to have that clause in the handbook, pre-warning the employee, look, be very cautious because we are going to recover our funds. And without a signature of some sort of a clause like that, you cannot do that to somebody's payroll. That means tools, that means uniforms, that means all of it. So be thinking about how you're handling those situations now if you don't have that particular clause. How about this one? And this is one that most of you will probably kind of shrug at, but how many of you have a driving policy? I mean, if someone's going to drive on behalf of the company, do you have a driving policy that says that individual must maintain a driver's license? They must maintain their own personal insurance. They understand that they have to abide by the laws of the road. And many of you are going to say, oh, Pandy, I don't have any trucks. I don't have any deliveries. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the individual in the office who's dropping off checks to the bank. I'm talking about the individual that you ask, oh, hey, could you go and pick us up lunch? Could you go and pick up supplies at Costco or wherever? If they're driving anywhere in their personal vehicle and they're doing it on work time for a work purpose, you should have some sort of understanding with them. And I recommend to clients at this point, you know what? Go and talk to the general liability insurance that you have. Talk to them. Find out what they will cover and what they won't cover. Ask them if they have a rider on your policy that covers drivers, that covers accidents on the road of personal property or personal vehicles. Look, this can get really costly. I've seen some really nasty accidents that were not the fault of the employee. They were the victim. But because they were on work time, it does get extremely sticky. And that could be a horrible workers' comp claim, as well as if the other individual driver in the accident tries to sue the individual, and the individual says, yeah, but I wouldn't have been there if not for, and they try to sue you. So driving policies are a little bit more important and vital than we tend to give them credit for. How about administrative corrections? Now, what I mean by that is the Fair Labor Standard Act covers almost every employer out there. And there is criteria by which to determine if you fall under the Fair Labor Standard Act. But within that, if you do, it is best to have a policy that reminds the employees of their responsibility to report corrections, to report incorrect errors in their payroll, and that you will take responsibility for any error or correction necessary based on something, an act or a decision made by the company. And I call it a core a policy. I keep that in one of my core policies for handbooks. But many companies aren't including that. And some attorneys, especially if it's not a labor law attorney, they are not going to think about this. So go back and review your handbook. Find out if there's something in there. And if not, put it on your list. We need to add it. How about the policy or a statement, a clause in there in regards to a payback of premiums when an individual is on a leave of absence? It's amazing. Some of you have the most eloquent, wonderful leave of absence policies, and I'm very impressed with them. I really am. But then it comes down to, well, wait a minute. They're gone. They're not getting a paycheck. And what about their insurance? So it's really a good thing to have something in there to say, look, this is what will happen to your premiums. We need you to pay it back by the certain date. Go back to, for those of you who are in FMLA, think about the language that's in the FMLA paperwork. Pull that, extract that, and put that in your leave of absence policy. I need the money, your portion, the employee portion, paid by this date during the month. I need it to go to this person. I need it to be for this amount. And, you don't have to put that in the handbook, the amount, but obviously let them understand that there is a plan and they need to understand that and agree to it before they go out on their leave of absence. This is, you are not required during an unpaid leave of absence, not protected by ADA and not protected by FMLA. You're permitted to turn off insurance if there's non-payment. So be thinking about that. I think that's very helpful if you can slide that in there. Another one that I want you to think about is, do you realize that you have to have something in your handbook? You are required, and again, I consider this kind of one of the core, but it can be very simple, but that you will abide by the National Labor Relations Board, Section 7 and 8, that individuals are protected in the conversations of compensation, work conditions, and terms of employment. Just a one-liner is plenty, but you really have to include that to not only remind your employees that they do have rights under the National Labor Relations Board, but that it reminds you and your supervisors and managers, look, this is their right and we have to give it to them. I know we don't like our employees out there talking about compensation, but hey, it is what it is. So be aware that you absolutely should have that in there and be cognizant of how to administer it. Now, these don't seem like huge policies, and they're really, really not. But the point I'm trying to make here is that even these little things can make a major, major difference in how you go about doing business and how your employees, contribute in terms of, or what they can expect at certain points in their employment. The last one I want to remind you is the use of photography. And I just had a gentleman call me today, and he said, we've had an employee who decided that she didn't really care for the dress code and how we are applying it. So she decided to go around and take pictures of the younger individuals. Now, the person taking pictures is well over 60. And so she's taking pictures of all these young ladies who are wearing clothing that she obviously doesn't wear, though it does fit within the dress code. And she's, and of course, non-consensual. Nobody knows she's doing it. But then she's sending it out to all of her friends and saying, just look at this. Just look at this. Look what I have to work around. Look how these kids are dressing. I just can't believe the company allows them to do this. Is that good for your morale? No. And if we had a policy, if they had a policy in their handbook saying no photography, how about people taking pictures of proprietary products? Do your clients and customers want their products put out on social media? Do they want them on somebody's private phone for later use? How about safety issues? If you've got some safety issues that you're in the process of working on, or some that maybe haven't been reported, somebody goes and starts taking a bunch of pictures and saying, hey, look what I have to deal with. This is just not a safe place. How is that good for you? So I highly recommend no photography outside of the needs of the business. And cell phones, obviously have cameras. So put it in the handbook. I know. It's a random list. But I'm telling you, it truly is something that you really can consider. And it's so easy. If you need help, let me know. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Call me at the Human Resource USA. Say, Pandy, go over that list with me again and help me get these into the handbook. That's what we're here for. We love doing this stuff. And again, your labor law attorney, they are there to help you get through these difficult times and be proactive. That's the whole name of the game here, isn't it? Thanks so much for attending and listening. We really appreciate it. Come back and see us again here at the Human Resource.